Cozy English Stories with Shara.
So if you look out the window right now and see gray skies, heavy clouds, maybe some rain, your brain is probably triggering a low-level stress response.
Oh, almost certainly, yeah.
Right, like you might feel this sudden spike of annoyance, or you feel instantly behind schedule, as if the precipitation itself is somehow this deliberate obstacle to your day.
Like it's an insult.
Exactly. We treat a low-pressure weather system forming thousands of miles away as this personal insult to our productivity. But today, for this deep dive, we're exploring a source that proves your frustration actually has nothing to do with the weather.
It really doesn't.
It has everything to do with a deeply ingrained societal addiction to being busy.
And, the irony here is where we're actually finding this proof. I mean, we are not analyzing some 500-page academic tome on cognitive behavioral therapy today.
No, we are not.
We aren't looking at a dense, highly technical white paper on the neurobiology of stress either. We are analyzing a curriculum designed for adult beginners who are learning English.
Which is just the most fascinating part of this entire exploration to me. Our source material today is a transcript from a language learning program called Cozy English Stories with Shara. And the specific entry is titled The Rainy Window.
Right.
Now, this curriculum is graded for A1 and A2 learners, so meaning it's tailored for people who are just beginning to grasp fundamental vocabulary and, really simple sentence structures.
And because the language has to be stripped down to its absolute bare essentials, there is just no room to hide behind complicated academic jargon.
Yeah.
The concepts are forced into their purest, most distilled forms, which is brilliant, actually.
Because it bypasses our defenses, right?
Exactly. Stripping away the linguistic complexity acts as this mechanism to bypass our usual intellectual defenses. Highly educated, hyper-optimized adults, we often use really complex language to justify our anxiety.
Oh, constantly. We build these intricate rationalizations for why we're stressed out.
Right. Why we can't stop working, why we are chronically exhausted. But by presenting a scenario in the simplest terms possible, this text just completely dismantles those sophisticated rationalizations.
It exposes the raw psychological framework operating underneath.
It really does.
So the mission of our deep dive today is to unpack exactly how this beginner's language lesson delivers this universally applicable masterclass in the psychology of rest, because it reframes our entire modern concept of productivity.
Just by breaking down a rainy day into basic sensory components?
Yeah, basic sensory and emotional components. So to start, let's establish the environment that the source creates. Because before a single word of dialogue is even spoken, the transcript opens with an audio cue.
The rain.
Right, the soft, constant pitter-patter of rain hitting a glass window. And Shara, the host of the program, she invites the listener to sit by a window, maybe grab a blanket, and take a slow breath.
It's very immersive.
It is. So as we get into this, I want you, the listener, to mentally position yourself in that space right now. We are looking out the glass, the room is warm, the outside is gray, and the water is falling.
And, establishing that auditory baseline right off the bat is a very deliberate intervention.
How so?
Well, from an evolutionary psychology perspective, human beings are just incredibly sensitive to acoustic environments. The sound of steady rain, what acoustic engineers would categorize as pink noise, it mimics the rhythmic, low-frequency sounds we actually experience in utero.
Oh, wow. I never thought about that.
Yeah, so it immediately begins to downregulate the nervous system. By setting this stage, the text is essentially prepping the brain's neurochemistry to receive a paradigm shift.
And that paradigm shift really begins with the introduction of Shara's co-host, Michael. Shara asks him for an honest check-in about the weather, and Michael's response just perfectly encapsulates the modern human condition.
He's not happy.
He is highly annoyed. He admits it. He had plans to go to the park. He had an itinerary. And now his shoes are wet. He has to carry a heavy umbrella, and he explicitly labels the situation a bad day.
With capital letters.
Right. He is taking the meteorological conditions as a personal affront. But Shara laughs softly at this and introduces a concept that I found incredibly striking. She tells Michael that his frustration is just his anxious security guard talking.
The anxious security guard. It's such a great term.
It's brilliant. She says this internal guard demands sunshine so he can remain busy and views the rain as a literal waste of time.
Which is a profound metaphor for the modern ego. Specifically, the ego shaped by the post-industrial revolution world.
Say more about that. What do you mean?
Well, prior to the widespread adoption of the mechanical clock and factory labor, human beings organized their lives around agrarian natural cycles. You worked when the sun was up, you rested when it went down.
Right, you were tied to the environment.
Exactly.
Yeah.
You worked hard during the harvest and you went dormant during the winter. Time was cyclical. But the Industrial Revolution shifted us to linear time. Time became a commodity. Time became money.
We started selling our hours?
Yes.
And once you put a monetary value on an hour, any hour not spent producing feels like an hour stolen.
That is the exact psychological trap right there. We have internalized the commodification of our own existence. We equate our fundamental worth as human beings with our constant motion and our output.
So the anxious security guard is what exactly?
It's the psychological defense mechanism we built to protect that output. The guard's primary function is to maintain the illusion of control over our linear time. As long as we have a schedule, an itinerary, a list of optimized tasks, the guard feels like we are safe.
Because we're justifying our existence through busyness.
Precisely.
But then a low-pressure system rolls in, the sky opens up, and the environment forcefully reminds us that we are not actually in control of anything.
The rain shatters the illusion. When the weather forces an unexpected halt to our meticulously crafted plans, the environment is dictating the terms, not us.
And the guard flips out.
The anxious security guard panics. Because the very thing it monitors, our schedule, has been compromised. What the source material is identifying here is that Michael's frustration with his wet shoes isn't actually about the water.
It's a symptom of withdrawal.
Yes.
Withdrawal from the addiction to productivity. That makes so much sense because when you suddenly can't execute your plans, you are left with this void. You're forced to sit with yourself without the numbing distraction of your task.
And the ego hates that.
Right. The frustration is just the ego throwing a tantrum because its supply of dopamine-driven busyness has been cut off.
And the text pushes this even further when Shara asks Michael, well, what if the rain is the world telling you it is okay to stop?
Which the anxious security guard violently rejects.
Of course. In the modern paradigm, stopping is equated with falling behind. Stopping is dangerous. To the hyper-optimized mind, stillness is an actual threat.
So if the ego views the rain as an enemy to productivity, the source material has to figure out a way to disarm that internal guard without triggering further resistance. Because you can't just argue with anxiety.
That never works.
Right. And Shara does something incredibly subtle here. She shifts the focus away from the macro inconveniences, the ruined park trip, the heavy umbrella, and she forces Michael to look at the micro details of the environment.
The window pane.
Yes. She directs his attention to the window pane and points out the water drops. She describes them as tiny diamonds sliding slowly down the glass. And then she brings his focus back to the pitter-patter sound, calling it a very old music.
Shifting from the macro to the micro, that is a core technique in mindfulness. But the underlying neurological mechanics are what make it so effective at bypassing the anxious security guard.
How does that actually work in the brain?
So when Michael is worrying about his ruined plans and his wet shoes, his brain is engaging in rumination. This primarily involves the default mode network, or the DMN.
The DMN.
Okay. Yeah, the DMN is a network of interacting brain regions that is highly active when we're not focused on the outside world. It's the network responsible for daydreaming, recalling memories, and most importantly, envisioning the future.
So it's the part of the brain that generates anxiety about what hasn't happened yet.
Exactly. When the DMN is overactive, it feeds the sympathetic nervous system, which is your fight or flight response. Michael's brain is treating the ruined park trip as a genuine survival threat, flooding his system with low-level cortisol.
Over a park trip.
Over a park trip. And you cannot simply command the default mode network to shut down. Shara knows she can't just tell Michael, hey, stop being frustrated. That would only increase his cognitive friction.
You have to hijack the brain's attention system instead.
You hijack it through sensory grounding. By forcing Michael to focus on the visual processing of a water drop, the tiny diamond, she is shifting his brain's energy away from the default mode network and into the task-positive network.
Oh, because he has to actually watch it.
Right. Visual tracking of a slow-moving, unpredictable object requires top-down attention. The brain literally has to reallocate its metabolic resources, its glucose and oxygen, to the visual cortex to process that real-time data.
So it starves the anxiety centers.
It completely starves them of the energy they need to ruminate.
It's an involuntary override. That is amazing. And she reinforces this visual override with an acoustic one. Shara points out that the rain is constant and steady, and she contrasts it with the loud and fast noise of the modern world.
Right, the city noise.
Yeah, and Michael realizes that the pitter-patter acts as a barrier. It covers up the sound of the cars in the city. He says, so the rain is like a soft blanket for the whole world. I just love this analogy.
It's a beautiful image.
It's like putting giant cosmic noise-canceling headphones on the entire planet.
Yeah.
But that physical acoustic blanket doesn't just block out the sound of traffic. It actually creates a vacuum that forces us to confront something much louder, which is our own internal expectations.
The contrast Shara draws there between loud and fast and slow and steady is biologically significant. In the natural world, loud and fast stimuli are almost universally associated with danger.
Like a predator attacking.
A predator attacking, a rock slide, a sudden storm. Our nervous systems evolved to treat loud and fast as an immediate cue to release adrenaline. And the modern city environment, traffic, sirens, the constant pinging of digital notifications.
The rapid-fire editing of television and social media.
Yes, all of it keeps our neurobiology in a state of chronic, low-grade alarm. We are constantly bathing in adrenaline.
Which exhausts us over time.
It leads to severe allostatic load. That's the wear and tear on the body from chronic stress. But rain is the exact opposite. Rain is slow and steady.
It's that old music.
Right, it's the old music because it's an environmental pattern that predates human evolution. Our ancestors learned that steady, prolonged rain usually meant safety from predators who were also seeking shelter.
Oh, wow. So we are biologically hardwired to feel safer in the rain.
We really are. The acoustic masking effect of rain physically dampens the chaotic auditory inputs of the city. It lowers the cognitive load required to process our surroundings. So when Michael calls it a soft blanket, he's describing a moment of profound sensory relief.
The environment is physically enforcing a reduction in stimuli.
Which gives the nervous system permission to stand down.
And that physical dampening of the environment's noise leads directly into the psychological dampening of the environment's expectations. Which brings us to a concept in the source material that I think is going to resonate uncomfortably well with our listeners.
The invisible pressure.
Yes. Shara and Michael discuss this concept of invisible pressure. Shara observes that sunny days come equipped with this built-in, unstated expectation.
They really do.
When the sun is shining, we feel a tremendous pressure to be active, to go for a run, to meet friends, to maximize the daylight. Michael enthusiastically agrees with this, noting he always feels like he should be doing something out in the world.
The tyranny of a beautiful Saturday.
The tyranny of a beautiful Saturday is incredibly real. I call it sunshine guilt. You know that nagging, almost moral weight you feel when it's 75 degrees and perfectly clear outside, but you are exhausted and you just want to lay on the couch?
Oh, absolutely.
If you do stay inside, you feel like you are committing a failure of character, like you're squandering a scarce resource.
Well, this is the logical endpoint of the commodification of time we discussed earlier.
Yeah.
We have reached a point where we have even commodified our leisure.
We have to optimize relaxing.
Exactly. We have internalized the capitalist framework so deeply that even our days off need to be maximized, optimized, and ultimately performed. A sunny day is treated as a high-value asset.
So if you don't use it, you're losing it.
Right. Failing to capitalize on it, failing to go to the park, take the perfect photo, or engage in visible recreation, it feels like a loss on our personal balance sheets. The invisible pressure is the societal mandate to constantly prove our vitality through outward activity.
But the rain changes the math entirely. Because the outside world is suddenly deemed inhospitable, that invisible pressure just evaporates.
It's gone.
The rain grants you permission, with a capital P, to stay home without the accompanying guilt. But the source material makes a critical, razor-sharp distinction here. Michael asks if the rain means he doesn't have to feel guilty for sitting on his sofa. And Shara tells him, you are not hiding from the world, you are resting with the world.
That distinction is everything.
It is, because looking at hiding versus resting, hiding feels inherently defensive. It takes energy, like you're bracing your back against a door to keep the demands out. You're avoiding something. But resting feels like an alignment with the environment. Am I off base here, or is there a deep psychological distinction between the two postures?
You have identified the exact emotional core of the lesson right there. Because the physical action sitting on a sofa indoors is identical in both scenarios, but the psychological posture is entirely different. This comes down to intention, shame, and systems theory. Hiding implies evasion. It implies that there is a legitimate demand out there in the world that you are failing to meet. and you're retreating in shame to avoid the consequence of that failure.
You're hiding from the expectation.
Right. When you hide, your anxious security guard is still fully on duty. He has just locked the door and is staring at the security cameras in a total panic. You are still burning cognitive energy, maintaining the barrier between yourself and your perceived obligations.
Because you still believe you should be out there.
Precisely. Hiding is an act of resistance against the prevailing system, which makes it exhausting. Resting with the world, however, shifts the perspective from individual isolation to ecological alignment.
Ecological alignment.
Yes. It utilizes systems theory, which suggests we are not isolated units operating independently of our environment, but interconnected components of a larger biological system.
We are part of the weather, not separate from it.
We are subject to the same atmospheric pressures and biological needs as the rest of the ecosystem. If the entire world, the sky, the trees, the animals, the streets, is taking a quiet moment of dormancy, your choice to stay on the sofa isn't a failure of productivity.
It's synchronization.
Exactly. You are simply joining the rest of the environment in a necessary biological pause. By framing it this way, the source material completely removes the shame associated with inactivity.
The narrative changes from I am avoiding my work to I am harmonizing with nature's rhythm. To see this radical systemic deconstruction of toxic hustle culture delivered through an A1, A2 English curriculum is just a brilliant use of the medium.
It really reveals how much cultural and moral baggage we attach to our environment.
And to further deconstruct that baggage, the source material turns its attention to the actual language we use to describe our reality. It dedicates a whole section to teaching 4 specific vocabulary words. And in doing so, it reveals how the words we speak actively shape the emotional reality we experience.
Because language is not merely a descriptive tool. It is the cognitive architecture through which we interpret and interact with the world.
Yes. So the 4 words Shara introduces are drizzle, puddle, cozy, and gloomy. She defines drizzle simply as a light, soft rain. Puddle is defined as a small pool of water. And when she teaches puddle, Michael has this wonderful moment of recall where he remembers jumping in puddles as a child.
The pure joy of it.
Exactly. That simple vocabulary word instantly strips away the adult layers of annoyance and connects the weather back to a state of visceral playfulness and physical joy long before his anxious security guard was ever hired. But the real heavy lifting of this segment happens with the words cozy and gloomy.
Because these terms carry massive emotional and cultural weight.
Very much so. She defines cozy as feeling warm and safe inside while it is cold outside. Then she tackles gloomy. She explains that people use this word for a dark, gray day, but she immediately intercepts the emotional weight of the word by stating, remember, a gloomy day can still be a beautiful day.
Which is a profound interception.
It is. Now, learning a language at any level isn't just about memorizing flashcards, right? It's about learning the cultural context and the bias inherent in the words. Gloomy is almost universally used as a pejorative in English. We talk about a gloomy economy or a gloomy disposition or a gloomy forecast. It always implies dread or sadness.
Always.
So how does redefining a word like that actually change a person's physical perception of their reality?
Well, we have to look at this through the lens of linguistic relativity, which is commonly known as the Sapir-Whorf hypothesis.
Right.
While the strictest interpretation that language completely determines thought is debated, there is massive consensus in cognitive linguistics that the structure and vocabulary of our language heavily influence how we perceive the world.
Give me an example of that.
A classic example is from the cognitive scientist Lera Boroditsky. She studied how different languages divide the color spectrum. Russian speakers, for instance, have distinct words for light blue, which is goluboy, and dark blue, which is sirenny.
Oh.
Because their language forces them to categorically distinguish between the two, their brains are actually faster at visually discriminating between shades of blue than English speakers. The language alters the physical mechanism of perception.
The vocabulary creates the boundary of the experience.
Exactly, and we could apply this directly to weather vocabulary. In modern English, gloomy is not an objective meteorological term. It is heavily loaded with connotations of depression, lethargy, and foreboding.
It's a mood, not a weather state.
Right. So when you wake up, look out the window, and cognitively label the day as gloomy, your brain acts like a search engine. It automatically accesses all the negative emotional files, physiological states, and societal biases associated with that word.
So you prejudge the day before you have even experienced it.
You instruct your nervous system to prepare for a mildly depressing, uninspired experience. You literally trap yourself in your own vocabulary.
You've written the script for your day before you've even had a cup of coffee.
But by teaching these language learners that gloomy is simply an objective description of a dark, gray day, and explicitly uncoupling it from the concept of bad, Shara is engaged in linguistic rewiring.
She's completely neutralizing the word.
She is offering a neutral observational definition and then pairing it with the possibility of aesthetic beauty. If gloomy just means gray, and gray can be beautiful, then a rainy Tuesday ceases to be a threat to your emotional baseline. It's no longer a moral failing of the weather, it's just a different aesthetic experience.
It takes the moral judgment out of meteorology, and that connects perfectly to how she defines the word cozy. Because she doesn't just say cozy means warm, she specifically states that we use it when we feel warm and safe inside while it is cold outside. The outside condition is a mandatory part of the definition.
That contrast is the operative functional mechanism of coziness.
Yes. Coziness actually requires the presence of an inhospitable element. You cannot truly feel cozy on a 75-degree sunny day. You can feel relaxed, you can feel comfortable, you can feel serene, but you cannot feel cozy.
It's impossible.
Right.
Coziness demands the juxtaposition of the cold, the dark, or the wet outside to establish a boundary. It highlights the warmth and safety inside by providing a contrast.
Which implies that the rain is not an obstacle to your comfort, it is the essential raw material required to construct it.
Wow. Yeah.
Without the dark and the damp, the concept of the warm sanctuary loses its entire meaning. This is actually the foundational principle behind the Danish cultural philosophy of Hygge. Denmark experiences incredibly long, harsh, dark winters. And instead of viewing the winter as this agonizing delay before summer returns, they built a cultural framework that relies heavily on finding deep, intentional comfort and psychological warmth because of the harshness outside.
They leaned into the contrast.
They mastered it, and the source material is tapping into that exact psychological truth. The gray sky isn't ruining your day. It is providing the necessary atmospheric contrast for you to experience a very specific, deeply restorative form of comfort. The rain is a necessary ingredient. It provides the boundary. And what the source material does next is take that idea that the rain is a necessary ingredient and it expands it outward. It moves from our personal, individual comfort to the survival and health of the natural world itself.
It scales up the empathy.
Exactly. This brings us to a beautiful exploration of ecological empathy.
This is really the moment the transcript elevates from a lesson on individual mindfulness to a broader philosophical lesson on connection and natural law.
Yeah. Shara asks Michael to look outside at the trees and the flowers. She asks him a very simple question. Are they sad when it rains? Michael, observing the environment without his anxious security guard filtering the view, realizes that no, they aren't sad. They look incredibly green, they look thirsty, and they are drinking.
They're thriving.
Right. And Shaw then uses this wonderfully evocative phrase. She describes the rain as the world taking a shower to clean the dust and to recharge the earth.
And by anthropomorphizing the environment, giving the world a shower and a recharge, the text is fostering a deep, almost instinctual empathy with the biosphere.
And then she immediately bridges this biological reality back to the human emotional experience. She tells Michael that just like the flowers, the human heart also needs a little rain sometimes. It needs time to be quiet and grow.
It's such a gentle way to deliver a hard truth.
I had to pause my reading when I hit that line.
Yeah.
Because it is so profoundly obvious, yet we completely willfully ignore it in our daily lives. We easily accept the biological fact that a plant needs water, and crucially, that a plant needs periods of rest and darkness to develop its root system and grow.
Of course we do.
Yet we expect ourselves complex biological mammals to bloom constantly in perpetual, unrelenting sunshine.
And if we follow that biological analogy to its logical conclusion, the sheer absurdity of our modern expectations becomes glaringly obvious. What happens to a physical landscape that experiences only perpetual, unrelenting sunshine with zero rain and zero cloud cover?
It becomes a desert, the soil cracks, the roots wither, and everything dries up and dies.
A world with only sunshine is a desert. Biological life on this planet requires oscillation. It requires cycles. It requires periods of outward energy expenditure, the blooming, the photosynthesis, the visible, measurable growth. That corresponds to the sun and our societal concept of productivity.
Right.
But it equally, non-negotiably, requires periods of restorative intake, cellular repair, and dormancy. That is the rain. The source explicitly mentions the rain cleaning the dust from the leaves. If we apply that metaphorically to human psychology, that dust is the cognitive fatigue, the sensory overload, the decision fatigue, and the emotional buildup of navigating a hyperconnected daily life.
We accumulate so much invisible dust every single day. The overflowing inboxes, the constant micro-decisions, the commute, the relentless news cycle, the social obligations, it just coats our leaves until we can barely breathe.
And without periods of quiet withdrawal to wash that cognitive dust away, our ability to function, to photosynthesize our daily experiences into long-term meaning or memory becomes severely compromised.
We just dry out.
We do. When Shara says the heart needs rain to be quiet and grow, she is offering a profound psychological truth. Periods of forced inactivity, periods of staying inside, or even periods of mild, low-energy melancholy. They are not regressions. They are not glitches in your operating system.
They're deeply necessary.
They are deeply necessary functional phases of emotional maturation.
It reframes a down day from a failure of willpower to a mandatory feature of a healthy biological system.
The heart's rain is the refractory period required to build resilience. In physiology, a muscle must tear slightly during exertion and then rest during recovery in order to grow stronger. The psyche operates on the exact same principle. It requires periods of withdrawal and quiet to process the staggering complexities of existence. Without the gray days, our emotional landscapes become barren, brittle deserts.
Understanding this philosophy intellectually is one thing. We can sit here and discuss systems theory and biological cycles, and it all sounds incredibly logical. But actually practicing it, actually sitting still when your anxious security guard is screaming at you that you have unread emails is incredibly difficult.
It's the hardest part.
And the brilliance of the source material is that it knows this. It doesn't just leave the listener with a beautiful botanical metaphor. It ensures they actually practice the concept by issuing a highly specific practical challenge.
It moves seamlessly from abstract theory to tangible application.
It provides a 3-step mini challenge for the listener to execute the next time they experience a rainy moment, or even if they just have a quiet window to look out of. And the steps are incredibly precise. Step 1, sit by a window for exactly 5 minutes. But there are strict rules applied: no phone, no books.
Which is huge.
Step 2, watch one single water drop. Just pick one and follow its specific path from the top of the glass to the bottom. Step 3, listen to the sound of the rain and say to yourself out loud, I am safe and I am quiet. Michael, acting as our stand-in for the anxious, overstimulated modern human, assesses the instructions and replies, 1 water drop, 5 minutes of peace. I can do that.
It sounds deceptively simple, almost childishly so.
It really does. But I zeroed in immediately on the strict rules established in step 1. No phone, no books. I want to challenge everyone listening to really honestly think about how agonizing 5 minutes of pure, unadulterated observation might feel to your modern brain.
It's harder than it sounds.
Sitting perfectly still for 300 seconds with zero external input. No scrolling through feeds, no reading an article, no podcast playing in the background, no music. For a significant portion of the adult population, that lack of stimulation borders on physical torture.
It induces a genuine form of acute neurological withdrawal.
So I want to ask you to break this down for us. Why this specific sequence of actions? Why is this 3-step blueprint so effective at forcing us into that elusive state of resting with the world?
Well, to understand why it works so powerfully, we have to look at the challenge not as a quaint relaxation exercise, but as a highly engineered neurological grounding technique. It hits 3 distinct cognitive targets in a very specific sequence.
Okay, let's start with step 1.
Step 1, the boundary. Removing the phone and the books is critical. The modern smartphone is not just a communication device, it functions as a variable ratio reward dispenser. It's highly similar to the behavioral conditioning mechanisms designed by B.F. Skinner.
It's essentially a neurological feeding tube for dopamine.
That is an incredibly accurate way to describe it. It provides a constant, unpredictable drip of dopamine through notifications, text messages, breaking news, and infinite scroll interfaces. Your anxious security guard relies entirely on that dopamine feed to feel productive.
To feel like it's doing its job.
Right, to feel like it is successfully scanning the horizon for both threats and opportunities. By creating a hard boundary, no phone, no books, you are abruptly severing that dopamine loop. The initial feeling you experience isn't peace, it is panic, agitation, or extreme boredom.
Which is the guard protesting.
That is the guard actively protesting the lack of data. But you must endure that temporary discomfort to reset your neurochemical baseline. You are clearing the stage of artificial stimuli.
Okay, so the stage is clear, the dopamine feed has been violently cut, and you are sitting there feeling jittery and probably thinking about everything you should be doing. Then comes step 2, the anchor. Watching one single water drop follow its path. Out of the thousands of drops on the window, why the instruction to track just one?
This is the genius of the exercise. When you're jittery, as we discussed earlier, your brain's default mode network is highly active, leading your mind to wander, ruminate, and spiral into anxious projections. You must arrest that spiraling. And you achieve this through visual single tasking.
Visual single tasking.
Yes. By forcing your visual cortex to track a singular, slow-moving, unpredictable object, the meandering, erratic path of one specific water drop, you are engaging top-down attention. You are demanding that your brain allocate a massive amount of its processing power to a highly specific, real-time spatial event.
Because it's unpredictable.
Because the drop's path is unpredictable, yes. It merges with other drops, it stops, it speeds up. Your brain cannot automate the tracking. It requires active, continuous focus. You literally cannot effectively spiral into an anxious thought about tomorrow's presentation while simultaneously calculating the exact trajectory of a water drop merging with another water drop on a pane of glass.
You just can't do both.
The brain simply does not have the metabolic bandwidth to do both well. The water drop becomes the cognitive tether that binds your consciousness to the absolute present millisecond.
That is utterly fascinating. The physical, mechanical act of tracking the drop starves the cognitive ability to worry. It's a sensory override of the anxiety centers.
It is a gentle, yet absolute override. And then, once the mind is firmly anchored in the present moment, the exercise moves to step 3, the mantra. Listening to the sound of the rain and speaking the words, "I am safe and I am quiet."
This feels like the psychological payoff, the culmination of the whole exercise.
It is the physiological payoff. Remember that the loud and fast city signals danger, while the slow and steady rain signals safety. By consciously tuning your attention to the pitter-patter, that old acoustic music, you are actively gathering auditory evidence of safety. Then you reinforce that environmental evidence with a cognitive and physical declaration. I am safe and I am quiet.
Why does speaking it out loud matter? Like, why not just think it?
Because of the vagus nerves. The vagus nerve is the primary component of the parasympathetic nervous system, which controls your body's rest and digest functions. It is the direct counterbalance to the fight-or-flight sympathetic system.
Right.
The vagus nerve runs from your brainstem down through your neck and into your abdomen. When you speak out loud, particularly in a slow, calm, resonant rhythm, you are physically vibrating your vocal cords. This mechanical vibration stimulates the vagus nerve, which sends a literal physical signal back to your brain, specifically the amygdala, telling it to lower your heart rate and reduce blood pressure.
You are bypassing the complex, worrying parts of your frontal lobe and speaking directly to the primal architecture of the brain.
Correct. You are reassuring the biological organism that this pause in activity, this total lack of productivity, is not a threat to its survival. You are safe. You are quiet. It is the final biological step required for true relaxation to occur, completing the transition from the anxious security guard's hypervigilant panic to the profound systemic state of resting with the world.
It is a complete neurological reboot, delivered in 5 minutes, using absolutely nothing but a window pane and a weather system.
And it is radically accessible. It costs nothing, it requires no subscriptions, no special equipment, and no complex training. It only requires a willingness to endure the initial discomfort of being present.
As we start to synthesize everything we've explored today, I am just struck by the sheer depth of the journey this session has taken us on. What presented itself as a rudimentary English lesson designed to teach the basic definitions of the words puddle and drizzle has unfolded into a comprehensive, fiercely intelligent framework for how to exist in the modern world.
It really has.
It has provided a masterclass in redefining what productivity actually means, in normalizing the biological necessity of rest, and in finding profound systemic peace in the gray, quiet moments of our lives.
It demonstrates a very important principle about wisdom. It does not require complexity. In fact, complexity is very often just a sophisticated defense mechanism we use to avoid facing simple, difficult truths.
The truth that we just need to rest.
The simple truth here is that we must allow ourselves to stop. We are not machines designed for perpetual output. We are biological organisms that require cycles of dormancy.
We have to actively disarm the anxious security guard. We have to recognize that the rain isn't ruining our plans. It is providing a soft acoustic blanket for the world. giving us the environmental permission to step away from the invisible pressure of constant performance.
We aren't hiding from our obligations in shame.
No, we are resting in alignment with the earth.
And we are learning to critically examine our vocabulary, to strip the negative, pre-programmed bias from words like gloomy, and to understand the mechanics of comfort. We must remember that the cold and the wet are not our enemies. They are the essential, contrasting prerequisites for the experience of coziness.
We are remembering ecological empathy. We're remembering that the world needs a shower to clean its leaves, and our hearts desperately need a little rain to wash away the cognitive dust so we can grow. We simply cannot exist in a state of perpetual blooming.
The final sentiment shared between Shara and Michael in the source text really encapsulates his entire philosophical and biological framework. As they finish their quiet moment by the window, Shara tells Michael, "You cannot pour from an empty cup. Fill your cup first."
You cannot pour from an empty cup. It's an idiom we have probably all heard 1,000 times on inspirational posters or social media feeds.
It's everywhere.
But in the specific context of this rainy window, stripped of all its cliché, it takes on a deeply literal and visceral weight. You fill that cup by letting the rain fall. You fill it by taking those agonizing, beautiful 5 minutes to sever the dopamine feed, watch a single water drop, and declare yourself safe and quiet.
Shara reminds Michael that the sun will come back.
It will. The demands of the world, the emails, the schedules, the park trips, they will all return. But today, right now, enjoy the gray. It is a special, necessary color, too.
Embracing that special color is exactly how psychological resilience is built. It is the fundamental mechanism of the human recharge.
And so, I want to leave you, the listener, with a final, provocative thought to mull over as you step back into your day. Look ahead at your upcoming week. Look at your meticulously crafted schedule, your obligations, your lists, and your plans. Somewhere in there, you are inevitably going to encounter your own metaphorical rain.
It's going to happen.
It might be an unexpected delay on the tarmac, a suddenly canceled meeting, a train that is running 20 minutes late, or just a random moment of forced, uncomfortable waiting where you cannot execute a task. When that moment hits and your internal anxious security guard immediately starts to panic, flooding your system with cortisol and telling you that you are wasting precious time, can you choose to view it differently?
That's the challenge.
Can you choose to view that delay not as a personal insult or an annoying obstacle, but as your own personal soft blanket? Can you use that unexpected vacuum of time as your explicit permission to simply rest with the world, even if just for 5 minutes? Can you find the tiny diamonds in the interruption? Because as we've learned today, the most profound and life-changing wisdom doesn't always come from a dense academic textbook or a complex productivity seminar. Sometimes the most complicated, over-intellectualized problems of our modern lives can be solved by the simplest things. Sometimes the deepest insights into human nature are waiting for us right there on the glass, just sliding down slowly if we only have the courage to stop, quiet the noise, and watch them fall.